Hi, I'm Annwyn. I was introduced to this program through a time at the hospital where my son had taken an overdose, and I was called to the hospital, and in his room was a lovely lady, Michelle, who was talking with and giving him some options and talking to him very bluntly about what was going on in his life. And after they'd had quite a discussion around rehabilitation, etc., she turned to me and asked me if I was okay. And I said no, I wasn't okay. And so she took me out into another little room and talked to me about what support there could be for families that have an addict in their world. She explained to me about the nastiness of the drug, and that the best thing I could do was to find support for me so that I could be better placed to support him. So I did that. She gave me the details for the Salvation Army, and I rang them and got an appointment and started the program the following week. I completed the program. I did one step every week for 5 weeks, and it changed my world. I felt like a failure. I felt like I hadn't been a good enough mum, and that I hadn't done enough to help him. But in fact, the help that I was giving him was the wrong help. I was in fact his enabler. I'd known for a long time that he was in trouble and that he had an issue with drugs, but the day it all came to the head, when I made a stand, I knew that day my life would never be the same again. So the journey for me has been horrific, and I fully understand when people say to me that methamphetamine destroys families, because that's what it's done to my family, including my parents, my other children, my son's children, the school. As wide as you could look, it was, if there was an effect. And so I'd been just sort of shuffling along, going from day to day, not really getting anywhere, until I met the lady that took me through the 5-step program. And the very first day I went there, the very first thing she said to me was, "Annwyn, you are not a failure." And do you know what? I just cried and cried and cried, because that's what I believed that I was. She taught me the difference between loving and enabling, and how close they are. And she taught me all of the different effects that not just methamphetamine but all drugs have on the human body and on the emotional roller coaster as well. I made a promise to myself on the last day of my program, and it was that I don't have to engage in an emotional relationship with an addict, and it doesn't matter if they're my son or not. As a person, you have the right to decide who's in your world, and people don't get an automatic entry into your world just because they're your child or your father or your whoever. So that day, knowing that information, I made a commitment to myself that I don't have to and will not engage in an emotional relationship with my son until he had been clean for 2 years. And that's a big call, because that's almost like saying, I don't want to know you, I don't want to hear from you, I don't want you to ring me, you're not to contact me, you're to do nothing. I did have a protection order, so he wasn't allowed to do those things anyway, but sometimes there was communication. And even though it was hard, I felt empowered, because you don't have to contribute to relationships that are hurtful for you. Without the 5-step program, I'd have been in there, boots and all, like, What do you need? Do you need this? Do you need this? Do you need that? I'm not now. I'm standing back because he's got to stand on his own 2 feet, and I've got to stop babying him and let him grow up and let him do what he needs to do as a man. And that's hard when my way of loving before was providing. You know, now I just provide a hello and how are you and a hug and great, you know, you're doing well with this, you're doing well with that, bit of praise here and there. And, you know, I hold my breath and I hope with all my heart that in 2 years' time he's still clean and, you know, and our relationship can begin again.
Kia ora, my name's Nolene Cheney. I'm employed with Northland District Health Board as the AOD Alcohol and Other Drug Educator under Te Ara Oranga. My role is regional, but I'm based in Kirikiri. The 5-step program is an intervention for whānau members affected by a loved one's drug or alcohol use. The program is unique in that it focuses on the family member as the client in their own right and supports them to recognise that they're an ordinary person dealing with a highly stressful situation. The 5-step method is broken down into 5 steps. The first step is an opportunity for the whānau members to tell their story. This is a really important step and it's often the first time that people have been asked to share their perspective. The focus is often before that being on the loved one who's using. This is a chance for the family to look at how they have been impacted. So step 2 is about education. This is an opportunity to provide education to the whānau member about whatever substance their loved one is using. This education empowers the whānau member to be able to set boundaries and it helps them to understand the risks connected with what their loved one might be using. Helps them to make choices and seek extra support and guidance with whatever substance might be relevant. So step 3 is an opportunity to look at how the loved ones are actually coping. So how is the whānau member responding and coping with whatever the issues are that's going on in their family. So this looks at just identifying and discussing what they're currently doing and how happy or unhappy they are about their responses. The step then introduces the idea that there are 3 common ways that people do respond and that none of them are right or wrong. They're simply an ordinary person dealing with an extremely stressful situation the best way that they can. Once we've explored all different ways of coping, we can then talk to the whānau member about which way they would like to try and support them with how they might decide to approach the situation in a different way the next time the need arises. So step 4 is looking at supports. So first of all, we break down support and what that means. What does support look like? What support does the loved one or the family member already have? And what support do they need? We then look at the different types of support, so such as emotional, financial, professional, cultural, religious, spiritual. And we look at growing their knowledge and their awareness of what there is in their community that might support them in those different areas. Sometimes people have become so caught up in the stress and distress that they're only focusing on one type of support and have neglected other areas. So this is an opportunity for us to widen their support and really put some stronger foundations around them. So step 5 is the opportunity to pull together all of the steps so far. It's a chance to have a look at developing a plan, but also to be asking the question of what's next. So when the question of what's next has been answered, we can then look at what barriers are there to achieving that and to support the whānau member to overcome those barriers and access the resources in their community. If you're interested in finding out more about the 5-step method, then please contact the AOD educator using the email address supplied. Alternatively, if you're outside of Northland, then contact Te Po, who have full details of the 5-step method.